So when we look at a rainbow that appears in the sky, it's very clear that we're seeing what we describe as to ourselves and to other people as separate colors, right? Identifiable as separate colors, distinguishable one from the other, right? But we know, certainly intellectually, conceptually, that there's actually not separate colors, right? You don't see red and then there's a gap and then the next color. That's not how it works. It's a continuum, isn't it? The rainbow is a spectrum. It's a continuum of light. And there's a way to look at and experience the rainbow as the continuum that it actually is, even though it most certainly appears as separate colors that we describe as separate colors. So that right there is showing in plain sight this extraordinary, you could say, kind of paradoxical nature of reality that appears as separate but is one thing, isn't it? It's one thing, one light, one spectrum of light. We're, of course, primarily used to and believe, for the most part, the consensus kind of human view is that we exist in a world of separate pieces and parts. And it's a rather convincing show, isn't it? We really do believe it to be the case. So the other metaphor is the dream state, or dreaming, you could say. So every night when we sleep, we may not always remember, but apparently we're always dreaming each night. That's an aspect of this experience of sleeping. We dream a whole world, don't we? A whole world. I don't know about you, but my dreams oftentimes are in the dream seem as absolutely real as what we call the waking experience. It's a world populated with the same things, people, places, and things, events, circumstances, right? All sorts of things. Thoughts appear in the dream, feelings, relationships. The full range, of the human experience can be encountered in the dream, isn't it? So just like why the dream's such a great metaphor is just like the waking world, the dream seems to be made of separate phenomena that are interacting with one another, right? I was in a body of water the other night, and the waves were kind of crashing upon me. And just like if I was in the ocean and felt the waves crashing upon me, just like that in the dream, right? But the dream, like the rainbow that appears as separate pieces, is made of one thing, isn't it? It is one thing, the dreaming consciousness, we could say. Let that sink in for a moment, just how powerful that is. It is one thing that's showing up as many things. We could look at the dream as an appearance, right? A visual appearance. It's not just visual, it's full bodied in a sense, lots of things are being encountered, sounds, and again, emotions and thoughts, and all these different realms in the dream state. Even the fact that we can describe all the seeming pieces and parts, whether of the rainbow or the dream, suggests to us, and we believe it pretty strongly, very convincingly, that we're talking about separate things in interaction with one another, and one thing causing another thing. You get in your car in the dream, your dream car, and you turn on the ignition and the car starts, right? It's like a cause-effect relationship, just like in waking life. And that's just absolutely like unquestioned in the waking life, certainly. In the dream life, we know that actually that there's not a cause effect thing going on. There's just dreaming that looks like cause effect. But because it's one thing, to talk about causes and effects doesn't really make sense, does it? Not really. And so my work is all about discovering, contrary to what we imagine most of the time, that this is one thing. It's not a thing, but one reality. Right now is one reality. Just as much as the dream is one reality appearing as many things, this is one reality appearing as many things. Individual humans, computers, the room you're sitting in, the chair you might be sitting on, or the bed you might be on, all these separate objects, right? Another great metaphor is the human body. We talk about the body in terms of separate parts. Hand, I broke my toe a couple nights ago, unfortunately, running in, had a little collision with the doorway leading out of my bathroom. And so we talk about the toe, like that's the thing that I injured. I injured my toe, as if it's a piece of the body that I have a label for. Or I could talk about my wrist or my knee or I had all the body parts. But the body, just like the rainbow and just like the dream, is a continuum. There aren't actually separate parts of the body. That's a fantasy. Where does my toe end and my foot begin? And where does the foot end and the ankle begin? And where does the ankle end and the calf begin? And you see, there's one body. If you have my book, my last book, This Extraordinary Moment, there's a chapter in there called The Body of Experiencing. And I use that metaphor of the body to try to highlight the way in which the field of experience is like a body, is one thing that looks like separate nameable parts and pieces, just like a human body. But when you investigate, you realize it's one field of experiencing. There's no parts or pieces here. So that's the perspective, you could say, that I'm highlighting in all of my work. The seamless nature of this, the fact that this is one thing, that this is a continuum with no separation. And it is that way right now, no matter what's occurring. The seamless nature of this is independent of how it's looking, how it's feeling, how it's being described. It's not a state to get into. It is the moment exactly as it is. But saying that may not be that helpful to discover what I'm pointing to. So it can be useful to look at the field of experience, to explore it, and see the way in which it is in fact a continuum, without any gaps, without any lines separating one apparently separate phenomena from another. So that's what I invite us to do right now. I think the simplest way to discover that is to notice how any part of the field that you might focus on, that you might focus attention on, in the same way that you might focus your attention on one of the colors of the rainbow or one of the objects in the dream that you're noticing. But now that here we are in this moment, pick anything. It doesn't matter what you pick in the experiential field. It could be a thought, it could be an emotion, a sensation, it Could be a phenomena like breathing. It doesn't matter. Really, literally doesn't matter. I was playing with this the other night after I hurt myself because there was pain. The sensation of pain was there. And I was noticing this very interesting thing, how it stood out as a kind of phenomena in a sense, with a kind of localization of sorts, like it had a kind of locality to it. But it was very interesting. Again, the paradoxical nature of reality is that there's the pain. I'm calling pain, and I was exploring this, just having fun with it. But take any sensation that you might be feeling, take your breath right now or something, the feeling of breathing. And again, it doesn't matter what you pick. And just notice that you can't find an end to it. You can't actually find a place where the sensation or whatever the phenomena is, in this case that I'm talking about, in my experience, the pain. I couldn't actually find a place where the pain experience came to a definitive end, and then what was not pain began. So you see the paradox of that. It's like it's standing out as seemingly identifiable as a phenomena. But as a phenomena, it actually has no independent existence from its context. In other words, it's not separate. It's not a piece. It's not a part. It's inseparable from the whole, just as the waves I always talk about are inseparable from their basis, which is the sea itself. But feel the way in which every phenomena is like that. You can't find the edge of any phenomena. You can't find the border, can you? I mean, tell me if you can. It's very much like, here's another metaphor. You know, you're looking at a movie on television, and you're seeing and having an experience of and reactions to all the characters interacting on the screen, the story that's happening, that's playing itself out, right, in the movie. But there aren't any individual objects or phenomena having relationships with other phenomena. Actually, there's just a field of light, just pixels of light that look like one thing interacting with another thing, one person having a conversation with another person. And our experience right now is precisely like that. It looks from one vantage and can be experienced from one vantage as one human being speaking to other human beings. So since I'm speaking, you can let yourself notice the sounds being heard, okay? All right. Now, without even really any intention on our part, what's interjected into that just by consciousness does this sense, creating this sense of divisibility, of separation, subject-object differentiation. Interjected in this experiencing of sound is someone that's experiencing the sound, right? That may be there. So imagine that you are hearing the sound. You're at the center of this experience of hearing sound. Now just feel whatever you imagine yourself to be. And feel the sounds of my voice. And notice how blended they are. How they are one thing, appearing as two things. Sounds and whatever it is that's hearing the sounds. but they're absolutely inseparable, aren't they, as a feeling? We may have an idea that there's something at the center of the experience that's having the experience, whether you think of it as a person, as an individual, as consciousness, whatever. We imagine there's the circle of the bubble of experiencing, in this case, experiencing sound. And then there's something at the center of that bubble of experience, right? That's having the experience, an experiencer. But there is no experiencer. There's no division anywhere. There's one feeling of experiencing. That can look like many different phenomena. But it's one feeling, one continuum of feeling, one continuum of experience. Just like the rainbow, just like the dream. It's just exquisite. It's like all these different phenomena that I can name, in a sense, at one level. The sounds of the birds outside my window, the sounds of the cars, the sound of my voice, the body sensations. But it's all one feeling, one appearing, one emanation. Absolutely no gaps separating one supposed phenomena from another. They can't be found. They blur into one another, literally. They merge into one another. They are one substanceless substance made of life, whatever life is, made of pure aliveness. It's funny, there's this term in, I guess it's a Sanskrit word, Samadhi, the state of oneness, where the individual soul merges with the divine. Samadhi is the nature of reality. It's one indivisible whole right now. Keep coming back to the feeling of what's here. What's the felt sense of what's here is where the seamlessness makes itself most obvious. I mean, if you happen to, however you have your computer set in terms of the Zoom, if you have it set up so that you see me bigger than the other, this what they call the speaker view, or whatever you're seeing, maybe you're seeing all the little boxes the same size in the gallery view. In either case, just look at the visual object being perceived. Let's say it's me. All right. And this ordinary consensus sort of view that we have, that we're over here, like I happen to be seeing James right now. He's on my screen as the big picture. You're the big picture, James. So that's right. Of course you are the big picture, because there's only the big picture. So I'm seeing that visual image, right? Which is how we conventionally talk about things. I'm seeing James. But the whole experience is one experience. What I call over there is being experienced. What I call James is being experienced. What I might imagine myself to be as the observer of James is all experience. And I can feel that, even though it looks like many things, an observer and the observed, a perceiver and the perceived in this case, it's just one thing: perceiving, experiencing. One of the qualities that can sometimes come more to the fore when you're feeling into the continuum in this way that we are is a profound sense of ease and peace. Because the absence of ease or the absence of peace is really that sense of one thing sort of intruding on another somehow, right? Something that's a pressure or a sense of a push or a pull or a resistance, one thing resisting another, right? But from this perspective of there just being one thing, there is no pushing and pulling, you see, is there? There's no one thing resisting or accepting another thing. There's just one thing. And this one thing is completely at rest within itself. It's never struggling with itself. It is itself. You see? There's no struggle. It's profound ease. In fact, even if something we might call unease were to arise, that we might label a phenomena as unease, that unease is inseparable from the whole. It is the whole. And so there's no unease in the unease, actually. There's no conflict in the wholeness. No resistance, no friction, right? It takes two things to create friction, doesn't it? But there's not two things here. What's so cool is how seeing that it's one thing doesn't stop us from experiencing a multitude of apparent things, does it? So it doesn't stop relationships from happening. It doesn't stop anything from, right? Because there's no dichotomy there. This that is one thing shows up as many things. You can see the rainbow, again, is a good metaphor, because you can see that it's just one, it's just light. It's one thing. It's all made of light, isn't it? And yet, what does it look like? It looks like a bunch of different colors. Or you can see that the dreaming consciousness is one thing, but it shows up as all the dream stuff, all the characters in the dream, all the events in the dream. So this is one thing, and it shows up as a Zoom call with a bunch of people having a conversation about the nature of things. So that's invitation. Look and see if you find any gaps. And you won't. You won't find any gaps between the colors of the rainbow, which tells you something, doesn't it? It means there's no separation between the colors, which means it's one thing. And it's just like this. There's no gap between the perceiver and the perceived. In other words, there's nothing at the center of this experience. Experience is not happening to someone. Experience is dancing with experience. You could put it that way. Just like the waves play with the waves, but they're all made of one thing.